This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What do you guys want to talk about?
Oh, okay, now you're working. Good Lord. Audio issues. What can you do? I said I've been looking for an upgrade in my microphone for well over a year now. It's one of those things that I just keep putting off, and I don't know. It's not like I'm refusing to buy a new one or that I don't want to invest in something higher quality. I just don't know what I'm looking for. And I just don't know how much I want to plunk into new audio equipment. If it's going to be like 200, 300 something bucks and I don't even like it. You know, everyone's doing podcasts these days, so they obviously need state-of-the-art gear. But again, I don't even know what I'm looking for. You know how it is with the internet. You go and read about the top 5 or top 10 best microphones to record for video and audio, and you're browsing over the details, reading about the small gadgets it comes with, things that you have no knowledge of, the frequencies. You're like, ooh, this is high class. And then you go and read the reviews, and everyone's crapping on it, going over all the problems they run into when trying to set it up, and you're like, all right, never mind. I'll keep doing research. I've been in that phase for about 8 months. Haven't made a lot of progress. It's hard. And there's a lot of stuff out there. First off, I don't have a lot of time to begin with. And, you know, every time there's a new hot piece of equipment that shows up on the market, how long before something else shows up to take its place? The turnaround is impeccable. When you ship stuff over from China in high quantity, you know, you can get a lot of stuff out there to sell. It's like buying an iPhone. I still have an iPhone 7 that I bought in 2016, 2017? Meanwhile, they're on number 37. Can't tell you how many times I get emails that are saying, oh, you should upgrade to this phone, or you should buy this new hot phone. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I like my phone. It works. I can dial phone numbers. I can text people. I can use Google if I need to look up something. Same with my computer. You know, I still have a MacBook Pro that I bought in 2015 after my HP crapped the bed. Still works like a charm. Everything runs. Knock on wood. You know, I don't run into any system issues. Sometimes it overheats, or if I have it in sleep mode, it'll fire up on its own and I have to shut it down and reboot it after the fan cools off. I can't do system upgrades because it's too old. Can't handle any more software updates. And that sucks. And I talked about this before, the whole issue I had with streaming Peacock earlier this year. I went to go to the website, or not the website, well, I guess it is the streaming website, and I log in for my account, and I go to click, I don't even know what I was watching, maybe some episode of World Championship Wrestling, and I just get a error message, and it eventually said something like, your system can't support our software anymore, so you have to upgrade. So I'm like, well, crap. I can't even watch Peacock on my computer anymore. I need to upgrade my Google Chrome software. And I have no way of doing it. The computer's so ancient it can't even handle it. Minor inconveniences. I have to do it on my phone. It's, I mean, it runs the same way. It's just annoying because I'm looking at a tiny little screen the whole time. But I've made it work. And it's for the betterment of my sanity. It's also I can sit here and torture myself by watching Retro Raw every week. And SmackDown. And Dynamite. That is why I do this. Because someone's got to be the bearer of bad news. I don't think I need to inform you as to how bad SmackDown is a lot of the time. Same with Dynamite. Retro Raw. Well, it's good to get historical perspective. Some people may not remember just how awful those shows used to be from like 93 to 97. The younglings in particular will never understand. If you think things are bad now, dude, go back and watch some of those classic Raws from 94. You'll be begging to watch 3 hours of Raw in USA every week. Pleading. Especially with the episode I just watched over the weekend. Well, I've had a couple days to let this one simmer. The July 25th, 94 edition of Monday Night Raw. A night that will live in infamy. God, did this show suck a cock. Let me tell you. Let me talk to you, to coin a famous phrase. Oh God, I hope LA Knight wasn't watching Raw during this period. He'd have quit being a fan and never watched the product again if he saw this show. We've reviewed a lot of horrible Raws in the last year or so. I haven't really tallied or tracked the absolute abominations. But I think we found a candidate for worst episode of Monday Night Raw in history. It's certainly up there. I know that doesn't take into account the thousands of subsequent bad episodes that are yet to air. But at the time, this surely ranked up there among the worsts. This was appallingly bad. And the funny thing, I even remember mentioning this during the brief card rundown last week. When they announced that the two featured matches for this week's show were going to be Tatanka versus Nikolai Volkov and Adam Bomb versus Yokozuna, I said, wow, that sounds epically horrible. Little did I know just how bad they could get. My expectations were still too high. Keep in mind, this is all circulating while the main story on this program right now is all about the $1 Million Corporation and whether or not Lex Luger is in cahoots with DiBiase. A storyline that has been confusing since day one, and a story that continues to get more confusing as the weeks go by. I am watching this storyline again in my mid-30s. My brain has grown massively since I was a young child watching this live. I still have no idea what's going on. So needless to say, I have not been all that enthralled with the last several weeks of programming. Take out the one really good Brett versus 1-2-3 Kid match that got completely swept under the rug after the fact. The show's been basically 45 minutes of the drizzling shites. So they open with Tatanka and Nikolai Volkov. As expected, it's fucking horrible. We've talked about Volkov's run in the WWF around this period. I mean, he's only been back for maybe a few months. At the point he was wrestling here on Raw in the twilight of his career, he was I did the math in my head earlier. I believe 47 years old. He was physically beaten up, could barely move, couldn't do shit physically. Everything he did looked like it was happening in slow motion. There was a point early on in this match where he went to try and give Tatanka a big boot off the ropes. He could barely get his foot 2 inches off the ground. Came nowhere close to making contact with Tatanka's face. I think he barely grazed the midsection. He had absolutely no body definition, no cardio, paler than a ghost, to the point where even Savage was mocking it on commentary. And JR, he didn't dispute it. It was kind of sad. And of course, he's in there working with Tatanka, who was far from Ricky Steamboat from a working standpoint. It's also important to mention, beyond the hideous nature of everything that's happening in the ring, this match also had a $10,000 bounty at stake. If you recall last week, DiBiase put down a bet that Tatanka would not be able to beat a crippled, broken down Nikolai Volkov. Guess he didn't think that one over thoroughly enough. And we already know Nikolai's ties with DiBiase's corporation. They are scanty at best. And while they're out there having this horrendous match, the finish comes literally out of nowhere, with Tatanka catching Volkov in a small package and pinning him. And obviously DiBiase's livid, because he's already out 10 grand. I'm livid because I just watched the worst match of all time. And the Macho Man is elated because he gets to jump in the ring immediately afterwards and tell DiBiase to fork over the money. And he does, begrudgingly, but he's a man of his word. But he also tells Tatanka that he still doesn't believe he can beat his man, Luger. And if he thinks he's capable in doing so, he can issue the challenge to his face. Naturally, here comes Luger down the aisleway to confront Tatanka. And in the most dry, unmotivated, and low-key manner imaginable, Luger gets on the stick. And I'm actually going to try to be less energetic than normal because this is me actually trying to do a Luger impersonation in this segment. Here I go. Tatanka, if you think you can beat me in a match, you name the time, you name the place, and I'll be there. And that was it. And he stormed out. As I reflect back, I still think I put too much effort into that. Luger was just... God, he's so over it. So mentally checked out. The amounts of fucks that guy gives, if only there were fucks to give to begin with, that is where Luger is at. He's just waiting out the rest of his contract before he gives Vince the finger and jumps over to Nitro in about a year. He's so done. And again, going back to the Luger DiBiase thing for a minute, you know, I get the idea that we're supposed to be confused about what's going on. But at the same time, Luger has outright mentioned already that he has not sold out. He's basically asserted that he and DiBiase are not in cahoots. So that begs the obvious question, why all the secret? Why doesn't Luger just come out and explain what's going on? Why does he have to be all vague and cryptic about what's happening? Of course, the answer is I'm sure even the company had no idea what they were planning at the time, so they're just throwing crap at the wall every week and seeing how far they can drag it out. It's like a Russo segment before our very eyes. And then we came back for the Head Shrinkers versus Barry Hardy and Joey Stallings. a rare highlight on the program this week. There are three universal things that are evident: death, taxes, and big dudes smashing smaller dudes always getting over. Especially big wild Samoans that just pick up dudes and throw them around recklessly, not giving a fuck where or how they land. It's basically what Fatu and Samu did with these juggernauts for 4 minutes. They went over with the top rope splash. Part of me was wishing they could have just made this a 60-minute Iron Man match so this could be the entire show. It was miles better than Jim Neidhart versus Jim Powers. I can confirm that for sure. Good God in heaven. You want to talk about going in with reckless abandonment. If you are thinking about skipping out on this show entirely, first off, I don't blame you. But if there is one thing that you have to watch on this show, it is the bump that Jim Powers took when he got thrown out to the floor less than 30 seconds into the match, where Neidhart gave Powers an elevated back body drop over the top to the floor, basically just heaving the guy out and not giving a shit where or how he landed. And Powers landed tailbone first on the ring apron, folded up like an accordion. I thought the guy was dead. At worst, I would have predicted imminent scoliosis. And the hilarious thing about it is that Jim Powers was a reputable enhancement talent throughout the mid-90s. This was not his only appearance. This guy was doing prelim jobs on Nitro in like 2 or 3 years on the other channel. And he was more jacked up around that point. He actually got a bit of a push for a period of time. Here, Jim Neidhart is just beating the teetotal titty fuck out of him for like 5 minutes straight. It was insufferably boring. At one point, Neidhart decided to lower the straps to reveal his extremely bloated belly. That was not a pleasant sighting. They let Powers get in a few shots toward the end until Neidhart cut him off with a power slam and then put him in... I wrote something resembling a camel clutch. Could have been something else. I don't know. Awful. Just awful. And the fact that Owen Hart was standing at ringside the entire time watching, that made me furious. Sitting there wondering to myself, why the fuck is Jim the Anvil Neidhart working the singles match when you got fucking Owen standing right there twiddling his thumbs? What were they thinking? At least Owen would have had a better match. But no, they had to put the Anvil in there to stink up the joint for 5 interminable minutes. Horrendous. And then naturally, at this point in the program, after we've seen a wretched TV opener with Nikolai Volkov and Tatanka, a semi-entertaining squash with the Head Shrinkers that was way too short, and a Jim Neidhart match that was not much better than the TV opener, not to mention the impending doom that was about to come in the main event with Adam Bomb and Yokozuna, what we desperately needed at this point in the show, in order to bring us signs of hope, was a promo segment featuring Alundra Blaze. Of all people, the show was dying a death, and somebody had the genius idea. Man, you know, the show kind of sucks. What can we do to lighten the mood and give the people something to latch on to? I know. Let's put a live microphone in front of Alundra Blaze. That'll get over like a wet fart in church. Oh my God. This was the point where I was convinced the show was a rib on me, specifically. They were actively trying to punish me almost 30 years later when I went back and watched it, because they knew I would. My God. And as expected, her promo was horrible. Just the most forced, uncharismatic, white meat babyface promo you've ever heard. Bland, dry as fuck. So bad, even the Macho Man couldn't help but interject with snide comments. There's a point where Alundra's talking about Bull Nakano and how she's fully capable of beating up most of the men on the WWF roster. Savage just goes, "Hey, I take offense to that." Just not even pretending like he gave a shit at this point. I also liked when Alundra was talking about how she's the WWF Women's Champion because she has pride, dignity, and morals. And there's about a 3-second pause. The crowd is completely silent. And then Savage just goes, "Morals?" I laughed so hard. That guy, Macho Man Randy Savage, here in 1994, the summer of 94, baby. He no longer gives a shit. That guy's tapped out. And he's not around that much longer. By the end of the year, that guy is gonzo. And he's showing up on WCW less than a year later. You can always tell the guys that have phoned it in. The ones that are just waiting out their contracts, ready to jump ship. They're plain as day. They're letting you know it. This place sucks. We want out. Yeah, well, they learned their lesson, didn't they? But things only got worse from there. Because here comes Luna Vachon. And she's there to explain that she is responsible for bringing Bull Nakano to the WWF. And well, that was about all Luna contributed to the segment. And that left the Macho Man to cap things off by asking whether or not Luna was going to be in Bull Nakano's corner next week. Was the Macho Man insinuating that Bull was a close relative to Michael Knock It to fuck off of AEW fame? Perhaps they're relatives. They could be bloodline. The stories, they really write themselves, don't they? This was revolting train wreck television. The only thing that made it virtually watchable was Savage completely phoning it in and acting like a jackass, of which I approved. And for the record, yes, I also completely forgot that WWF had a women's division in 1994. Much less me forgetting the fact that Alundra Blaze was still the champion. Speaking of revolting television, it is time. We've arrived for the second featured match on this program. A match that we've been eagerly waiting to see for 7 days. They actually went as far as to hype this up and treat it like it was a big deal. It is Adam Bomb versus Yokozuna. A TV-style main event that only Vince McMahon would find noteworthy. And the ironic thing, he wasn't even around. He wasn't even there. He was still at the hearings for the steroid trials. He wasn't even showing up to television. So that probably means that somebody else had to book this fucking fiasco. Who was responsible? I must have their names written and faxed to me so I can publicly shame them and degrade them for coming up with such a horrible idea. Adam Bomb versus Yokozuna. Somebody thought that would have been a good idea to book. My God. I take back everything I ever said about Nikolai Volkov looking like he was wrestling in slow motion. Adam fucking Bomb, dude. God, was he horrid. Wrath was never a good worker by any stretch of the imagination. But just like Crush, another big generic dude that was around for ages, never got any better the more I saw of him. He was horrible in WWF in 1993 when he debuted. He was horrible when he was working with Bryan Adams as part of Chronic in the dying days of WCW. Hideous. Figures that Vince liked him, though, because he was 6'6" and weighed almost 300 pounds. Didn't have any talent to speak of, but he was big, pal. That's all that mattered in Vince's eyes. I couldn't believe how long that guy was around. Meanwhile, you got Yokozuna having to carry a slow-moving ass. And Yoko was far from motivated at this point. He was also in rapid declining health, so he was even slower than he was the year prior when he was the champion. So they're out there having this horrible match, and right as Adam Bomb is making his comeback, who should come out but Harvey Whippleman and Quang? Two guys that not only did I completely forget they existed, I didn't even put two and two together that Adam Bomb and Harvey split off from each other. I had completely forgotten that Harvey was Adam Bomb's manager for a period. That is how little impact they've had as a duo on television. So Bomb goes to hit the ropes and drop an elbow, but Quang trips him. At which point Bomb goes out and gets into a fight with Quang until the ref counts him out. And he grabbed Harvey by the collar. Harvey looked on blankly and expressionless. And then Bomb proceeded to give him the world's worst military press onto Quang. That was it. That was everything that happened. Low-key, Harvey Whippleman may be the worst wrestling manager of all time. I used to think Paul Jones was up there in terms of the worst managers in wrestling history. Oh no. No. Harvey has that guy beat. Tenfold. Garbage. Just a garbage match with a garbage afterbirth. That sums up most of the show in a nutshell, doesn't it? Oh, no, that's a lie. Damn it, I killed my own joke. No, what really was the best description of this garbage dumpster fire of a program was following that with a Duke the Dumpster Drozy match. Get it? Because he's a garbage man? God, I kill myself sometimes. I wish God would have killed me for having watched this episode. It's Duke the Dumpster versus Dwayne Gill, with Jerry the King Lawler on phone dial-in, here to apparently remind us that he is still feuding with this Duke fella, bringing up that infamous TV angle from weeks back where Lawler smashed a garbage can over Duke's face, and the company had to do massive damage control skits to get over the backlash they got from the network about violence. Remember that? That hot water they got in for doing a risky angle on television? Too edgy for the younglings out there in the audience? Hitting a guy with a gimmick trash can? God. To think this is what they had Lawler doing in WWF circa 1994. Feuding with Duke the Dumpster Drozy. Could you get any lower? The other thing he brought up here was having Bob Backlund on as a special guest for the King's Court next week, which was relieving in the sense that it guaranteed at least 5 good minutes of material for next week's Raw. Instead of that Alundra Blaze promo, that's what the show needed. It was a King's Court sketch with Lawler and Bob Backlund. Anyway, Duke won with the trash compactor in like 2 minutes. I wrote nothing down about the match. No one gave a fuck. And my final note for this entire show reads in all caps. Shit! It's pretty descriptive, I know. But if you watched this episode in full like I did, you'd have probably had the same opinion. I didn't even go into this one with a bad mood. I just watched everything that unfolded, and it absolutely killed me by the end. This was one of those shows where there were so few redeeming qualities about it. Virtually every segment sucked. And that hasn't actually been the case with a lot of these Retro Raws. Normally we get at least one good segment in there. Yeah, it's surrounded by a bunch of bad stuff, but this show didn't have any of that redeeming quality factor. It was all garbage. Now, I figured going in, this one wasn't looking too hot to begin with, especially after what they announced last week to hype this one up. My fault. I still set the bar too high. And just in case you forgot, there is a SummerSlam show coming up in about a month. And their initial hype for this card is atrocious. They got like one major draw in the Bret Owen WWF title feud. And then they got everything else. And it really is everything else. I mean, I'm not currently talking about the SummerSlam card updates because I can't stand Todd Pettingill. But he's doing his damnedest to hype this thing up. He's trying to bring the enthusiasm for this card in Chicago. So far, it's a very mid card. And I'm not specifically talking about the mid card. I'm talking about the entire card. But at least I can say this. As bad as a lot of the build is for SummerSlam 94, at least I know more than like 2 matches that are being advertised. We're slowly coming up on this SummerSlam pay-per-view for WWE. What is it, like 2 weeks out now? I'm not entirely sure if I could confidently sit here and tell you that I know more than 10% of what's being advertised for that show. I know Roman is wrestling Jay, and I've seen a few clips of the Brock Cody stuff on Raw. So even if that match hasn't been officially set in stone, at least I know it's a foregone conclusion that it's evidently going to happen. Beyond that, totally out to lunch. I have no idea what they're currently booked for that, or what they're currently booking for that card. I barely know what's going on with SmackDown half the time, if it doesn't directly tie in with the bloodline. So if we're going to sit here and ramble about mid-build to pay-per-views, it's not just classic WWE that falls into that conversation. Modern WWE is just as guilty. Just take out 80% of the star power. So the real question is, how well did this show do in building up excitement for SummerSlam? Well, kind of depends on what program you're looking at. If you're strictly reviewing the Bloodline story, then sure. I'd say they did a solid job hyping that feud up. It wasn't my favorite of the Roman Jay interactions, but at least they're trying. If you're talking about everything else, well, let's start here. What is everything else? That's the issue. Take, for example, the way they're going about with his U.S. title picture. Austin Theory, the champ, needs an opponent for SummerSlam, right? Okay. So how are they going about crafting a feud for him? Well, they're doing a series of 4-ways on TV where the winners of said 4-ways are then going to square off in a match, and the winner of that singles match will then face Theory for the belt at the pay-per-view. All right. So how is that really generating any heat on Theory in the process? Well, it's not. There's no feud here. They're not developing anything out of this. They're just finding Theory his designated challenger of the month. because WWE doesn't really know how to do effective mid-card storytelling anymore, especially when it comes to their champions. I mean, if it doesn't directly involve their world champion on either brand, for WWE, they say, fuck it. It's really not that important. And remember what I said last week when they did that first four-way? That I had completely forgotten that Austin Theory was even on this show? That is how little impact he has had since they drafted him from Raw. We're now seeing the effects of that. Now they're attempting to do something with him on SmackDown. And it involves him sitting around for 3 weeks watching other dudes fight each other until they actually crown a number one contender, who I think most people were hedging their bets was going to be LA Knight. That wasn't until they saw the finish to this match. And you know, it's really unfortunate. Because if they actually took their time in letting Theory and Knight go out there for a few weeks and shoot some angles or cut some promos on each other, that could have been one of the more highly anticipated title matches for the entire SummerSlam card. But instead of actually doing something with those guys where they could go out there and interact for a period of 2 or 3 weeks, it's typical WWE lazy booking where they do a generic number one contenders match for a belt. Those two guys are going to go out and have a match for said belt at the pay-per-view. One guy's going to win, one guy's going to lose, and they're going to split off and go their separate ways. And just for the record, the second four-way they booked this week was Rey Mysterio, Cameron Grimes, Sheamus, and LA Knight. Just picking 4 random dudes out of a hat and saying, cool, we'll go with that. And I wrote so little down about this, but to be honest with you, as I look over my succinct notes again, I really don't think I'm missing out on any important detail. Here's everything I wrote down from bell to bell. Guys did spots. The crowd didn't give a shit about anything anybody did unless it involved LA Knight on offense. And evidently the wrong guy won. Do I need to say any more? I do remember getting some astute journalism from Michael Cole on commentary. And the only reason I remember it is because it was so goddamn stupid. This was his earth-shattering query that he wanted everybody to think about. What exactly is it that makes LA Knight so captivating? And I just sat there in silence for a moment or two, just looking up at the ceiling with thoughts wandering, thinking to myself, you know, that is a rather interesting question, Michael. I wonder what it could be that makes LA Knight so captivating to watch every week. I'm trying to put my finger on it. I just, for whatever reason, it's just not coming to mind. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. A revelation that came over me at that very moment. That's when I said, oh yeah, I remember. He's really fucking good at his job, and everybody else fucking sucks. God, what a dumb statement. That's what Michael Cole thought during this match. He just now fucking figured it out. That LA Knight is really talented and Cole's just now starting to pick up on the fact that people are digging the gimmick. Fucking moron. And I talked about it earlier, the wrong guy winning. Yeah, they put Rey over. Why? Just to spite LA Knight. Clearly not the right call. I mean, you could visually tell when Rey got the pin at the end, they piped in a shit ton of canned crowd noise. You look at the audience, half of them were just sitting there stationary or giving the thumbs down. Nobody wanted to see that. And I even knew, as soon as Theory pulled Rey out of the ring and shoved him into the steps, I was like, yep, Ray's going to make a miraculous comeback and win. Sure enough, clean pin, 1, 2, 3. And no one cared. I'm surprised they didn't beat LA Knight. I didn't remember who Ray pinned in this match. But again, going back to the subject of the whole build to this, what is the build? Okay, so right now, it's Escobar versus Ray next week. I assume Ray goes over in that match. Either way, it's a babyface match, so there's not going to be a ton of heat for it. And if it turns out being Ray versus Theory at SummerSlam, okay, fine. But are the people really going to care about it like they would have if they put LA Knight in that spot? No, probably not. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if people tried to hijack that segment. If people tried to start an LA Knight chant in the middle of that match, would you be all that surprised? I sure wouldn't. I'd actually kind of encourage it. No offense to Ray or Theory, but what the fuck? Come on, seriously? You're telling me that's going to get more over than a potential Theory versus Knight match where LA Knight wins the US title? You're telling me that pop wouldn't set the stadium on fire? Maybe that's why they didn't book it. Because they figured it would have overshadowed everything else on the entire card. Up to and including the Roman J title match. And maybe that's part of their strategic planning to not put LA Knight in that kind of spot. Because they see him as a potential threat of stealing the show. God forbid. Yeah. And we're supposed to pretend like that's a bad thing? And you know, I've heard people throw this out recently. How LA Knight is getting the same jobber treatment a lot of previous talents in WWE received when they were starting to organically get over. Zack Ryder, Damian Sandow, Miro, Bray Wyatt, Ryback. Christ almighty, Wade Barrett? The guy that's fucking sitting 3 inches to the right of Michael Cole, their play-by-play guy? I mean, I could run down the laundry list of names that WWE screwed up over the years. Countless. Too many to name. But you know, the comparisons aren't that far off. LA Knight is slowly following into that same category. He's getting over naturally. It's not being forced. The people are just taking to him because he's really talented and really good. So, of course, like they always do, they drop the ball and they do everything to make sure he doesn't stay over. Which, if you think about it for a minute, that's actually worse than what Tony Khan does. Tony's just an idiot. He doesn't know how to capitalize when guys get over, so he just pulls them off TV or doesn't feature them consistently. With Vince and WWE, it's a completely different case. They actively make sure they book those guys on TV, so they deliberately job them out and make them look like geeks. That's even more offensive. And we'll see what the end result is. Do people naturally gravitate toward him that much more? Or do they eventually sour on him and give in to WWE's propaganda? We all remember what happened when they tried the same treatment with Bryan Danielson. Remember the whole B-plus player thing? Look at how that ended. And, you know, here's another thing, too. Because I've heard some people speculate that the issue with LA Knight is an age thing. You know, the WWE doesn't want to push him because he's an older guy. They might potentially see that as a problem in putting stock in him. Thinking he's injury prone, he's not a long-term prospect, blah, blah. To which my response to that is bullshit. Because look at the guy they put over in this fucking match. Rey Mysterio's been a heavily pushed talent in WWE for years. He's older than LA Knight is. And that guy's had way more health complications than LA Knight, dating back to well over a decade. They don't have a problem featuring him. So no, it's not an age thing. It's WWE doesn't have plans to do anything big with him, so they're trying to subdue his momentum by pulling the rug out from under him. Trying to slowly get the people to back off with a chance. And we'll see what happens. Maybe there's a way to salvage it. But that's probably going to come from the hostile, passionate fan base making sure WWE hears their voices. If they want LA Knight to stay on top, they're going to need to hijack every show and chant LA Knight until Helen Keller hears it. Until then, just keep expecting more of the same. And by the way, we'll come back to the Theory Mysterio thing in a bit, because Theory demanded that Adam Pearce book him in a match with Escobar. Non-title, of course. But, yeah. Guess this is what general managers are in wrestling these days. They're spineless, fragile sheep that give in to wrestlers' demands on the spot and let them walk all over them. Never mind the obvious dilemma in this booking quirk. The fact that Adam Pearce just signed off on the match like it was no issue. Obviously not pre-planning an entire card well in advance, so of course he had room to book Theory versus Escobar on the spot, which evidently would get time. What stood out to me was the fact that Theory just walked up to Pearce and demanded to be booked in a match with Escobar. Just like that? No stipulations to favor Theory? Nothing on the line? Austin Theory is supposed to be a heel, correct? It's just making sure I didn't miss anything. Where the heel made an open challenge to the babyface for a fair one-on-one TV match because he wants to settle an issue? Am I missing something, or am I just reading way too much into it? Perhaps so. Anyway, moving on. They showed us the Brock Cody footage from Raw this past Monday night, where Brock attacked Cody and laid him out in front of his mama, which that was the clip that I saw on YouTube the other day while I was on lunch break. And that match is official, apparently. I don't believe they've added any stips, but they got another week to do so if they want to up the ante a little bit. I mean, it is their third match. If it is going to be the blow-off, I'd suspect they maybe want to try to make that no DQ. I mean, far be it for me to want to see a no DQ match. We've seen enough of them, but at least this match would warrant it. But I guess we'll find out. Always lovely seeing the segment on WWE television where the hometown hero goes out there and gets punked out and left for dead by the heel. Gee, I wonder who booked that segment. So then we had Charlotte versus Io Sky with Bayley on commentary, who I believe was the sole highlight of this entire program this week. Just sitting there and pooning Michael Cole on the headset for like 5 minutes. Heel Bayley is so underrated. All those years I watched her as a babyface in NXT, I did not think the day would ever come where I would say, you know, I think Bayley makes a much better villain than a protagonist. Lo and behold, here she is giving Michael Cole a hard time and just being a total obnoxious douche. And it was great. She's a great prick. I wish we'd see more of it. It was more entertaining than the match. I know I say it every week. Charlotte sucks. I don't care what anyone says. She's slower than molasses. Everything she does looks choppy as fuck. She's literally the poorest imitation of Ric Flair I've ever seen, and she's his fucking daughter. Buddy Landell did Ric Flair better than Charlotte. Jay Lethal did Ric Flair better than Charlotte. God, she's terrible. They wrestled for a while. It was really boring. I think the only spot in the entire match I was mildly impressed by was Io giving Charlotte a running powerbomb out of the corner. And that was only because Io actually held Charlotte up a little bit before dropping her. And Io is not what you would call a big person. Aside from that, this thing went totally off the rails once Shotzi showed up on the big screen to do her Chucky cameo, which then prompted Bayley to abandon Io mid-match and leave. Why? I don't know. Just roll with it. Meanwhile, Io is sitting there going, "Come back. I need you." To which I wrote down, "Why? You are in control of the match. Charlotte is laying there in prone position in the middle of the ring. Just hit a move and be done with it." At which point, after the little distraction angle with Shotzi on the Jumbotron, by the way, never went anywhere, but I figured, okay, so they're doing that so they could set up the finish. Fine, whatever. The match was boring to begin with, so at least they can keep it on the short side. Oh no. No, I was way off. No, they do the distraction with Shotzi. Bayley disappears. And Io and Charlotte kept doing moves. And they wrestled. And they wrestled. And they wrestled. And they wrestled. And they kicked out of a few roll-ups. And they wrestled some more. Both girls were totally blown up and lost. I screamed at my TV monitor, "End this fucking match." Probably woke up the neighbors. And finally, after another 5 minutes of interminable moves, Charlotte finally hit Io in natural selection and pinned her. This was awful. It literally would never end. It got worse the longer it went. The crowd did not care. That is important. And then, of course, after it's over, Asuka just runs in there and beats the shit out of Charlotte. Which, you'll be surprised, the crowd popped for her. That is when it hit me. Is Asuka supposed to be the babyface in this feud with Charlotte and Bianca? What's her deal? No idea. And where the hell did Bayley go? She left mid-match to apparently go find Shotzi in the back. To my recollection, I don't think she ever found her. What happened to Bayley? Did she get lost? Did she walk into Narnia? She totally vanished. Maybe Shotzi pulled an Uncle Howdy and hog-tied her in a room and stuffed a gag in her mouth like he did to LA Knight. Who knows? All I know is that I do not care about this program, and I also don't care about Bayley feuding with Shotzi. And if it leads to a hair versus hair match at some point, I also really don't have much of a desire to see a bald Bayley. Could be funny, but it's not something I'm clamoring for. But you know what I am interested in seeing? Dom Mysterio as the NXT North American Champion. The Weasel found a way to win gold. How the hell did he pull that off? Now granted, it's the North American title. Of all the belts in WWE, I completely wiped from memory. Yeah, that one made the cut. But Dom has it. So I guess by default, that makes it the second most prestigious belt in WWE, behind the Universal title, just because Dom's awesome. Oh, and speaking of awesome, his promo here, just fabulous. Standing there with Mommy Ripley, talking about how he's here to represent the entire North American continent as a real champion, unlike his deadbeat dad, who, even if he wins the United States title, that still only means he's champion of the United States. Dom still has him beat by being champion of all of North America, including Canada. So how do you like them apples, Ray? What a dick. Anyway, Butch showed up and challenged Dom to a match. And as Dom tries to weasel out of it, who should then make a cameo on this show but Shawn Michaels, saying that he's going to talk to Adam Pearce to get the match signed off on. Or signed off. Signed on, signed off. Do people say signed off on? I don't think that's correct grammar. Well, the point is, that is two, count them, two impromptu matches on this television show that Adam did not plan for, but still greenlit. Because again, the story is, Adam Pearce does not book entire cards in advance, despite the fact that it's his fucking job. Worst GM ever. So then we had our first of two impromptu matches. Austin Theory versus Santos Escobar. The match that Theory, the heel, demanded on his behalf. The heel wanting a fair fight with the babyface. Sounds about right. I mean, the match was okay. Can't really say any more than that. They wrestled for a while. Nothing looked funky or out of place. I'll talk about the finish in a minute. You know, Escobar had a nice little fiery comeback. Theory fed well, bumped like a machine. That kid's a pro. And, well, I did note this. They did a really dangerous looking spot where Escobar gave Theory some kind of hurricane run off the top rope. But it wasn't like one of those Frankensteiner moves where the guy's kind of perched and has time to rotate and do the backdrop. They basically had both guys shift momentum mid-air, and it turned into like a snap Rana while both guys were coming down. Looks sick. Not really something I would have suggested they waste in a random TV match when it probably could have been saved for a more impactful moment on pay-per-view. But at least it led directly to the finish. Escobar hit the running knees on Theory and then hit him with the Phantom Driver and pinned him. So for the record, yes, they just beat their United States champion clean in the middle of the ring in a throwaway TV match. But I think the bigger question is, what does that entail for next week? You know, now that they've had Escobar go over, do you have Theory cost in the match so Ray gets the title shot? Is it going to be another one of those lazy booking three-way deals like they did with the girls? God, I hope not. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of Escobar and Theory in a rematch, now that I've actually seen them go at it for a few minutes. You know, give that a little more time to breathe in a bigger venue. Could be a fun title match. I'm just afraid they might go with the three-way. I mean, it's a cop-out, but WWE loves them some multi-man matches, so I never put it past them. The only other way I see it going is them putting Ray over, but Theory ends up somehow costing Escobar, which they had to be clever with booking because, I mean, they don't want to bury Ray. He's still a babyface. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, the match had a solid finish. I'll at least give it that. Everything else was kind of a modern WWE-style match. Nothing wrong with it, but wasn't anything all that memorable. And that took us to the other impromptu match they set up less than 20 minutes prior. So really, if you think about it, had it not been for the altercations with Theory and Escobar, as well as the one with Butch and Dom, this entire second hour of SmackDown would have been entirely pointless. Would have been nothing but dead air time. So yeah, Dom and Butch, Butch and Dom. Sounds like a D-list sitcom. Unlike the other match we just saw, though, with Escobar and Theory, this one had way too many smoke and mirrors in it. You know, the stuff they did early on was just kind of status quo wrestling. Butch did all his Ronnie Garvin joint manipulation, pretzel stretching offense. You know, Dom kept trying to cheat with Rhea's help. They do a spot where she tried to feed him a chain, but Ridge Holland ran out and snagged it. Didn't lead to anything of value except a commercial pitch like 8 seconds later. I don't even know why they did it. And when they come back, Pretty Dreadly came out, and one of them was in a wheelchair. Can't remember if it was the blonde one or the brunette one. Doesn't matter, they both equally suck. At one point, I heard Michael Cole say, and I quote, "I don't exactly know why they're down here at ringside." Great. So even the announcers are fucking brain dead as to what's going on. Anyway, once the crop top cretins got involved, I just walked out of the room and stopped paying attention. The gimmick is beyond go-away heat with me. It's horrifically unwatchable. I refuse to partake in it. Dom retained. That was the only good thing about the entire segment. And Rhea, I guess. But that left just enough time to close things out with the Bloodline segment. And it's a contract signing. Yeah. So even the Bloodline aren't excluded from these, huh? Talk about the most overdone angles in the history of pro wrestling. Just add that one to the list next to pole matches and work-shoot promos. Now, to be fair, this wasn't an official contract signing because, well, as we found out from Jay here, this match is no longer about contracts or stips. It is now tribal combat, which I think was basically their way of just saying it's no DQ, anything goes. But I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. First, they got Roman out there basically trying to play the whole thing off. You know, he's treating it like a joke. The idea that Jay is actually serious about fighting him for the title at SummerSlam. He thinks Jay's ribbing him. Of course, Jay's dead serious about it. He's got to finish the job since Roman put his brother in the hospital. This is personal now. Which kind of prompts one of the more comedic moments we've seen in this feud as of late. And I don't entirely know if I was supposed to laugh at this, but after Jay declares that this is now tribal warfare or tribal combat, whatever he said, Roman kind of gets that stern face going, and he pauses, and he goes, Do the elders know about this? And there were maybe like 3 or 4 people in the crowd that burst out laughing. That did not help my composure because I also was trying to hold back from smiling. But that just did me in. It was such a bizarre line, but I think it was Roman's delivery that made me laugh. But of course, Roman takes the belt off, takes off the lei from around his neck. He puts them both over the desk. And then he and Jay have some kind of show of respect. Don't really know what that was. And right as Roman goes to leave, Solo tries to turn and lay out Jay with the Oriental Spike. But it is Roman who grabs Solo's hand and holds him back. And then Jay kicks Solo in the jaw and he goes bumping out of the ring. Yet again, I'm not going to harp on this for too long, but I'll reiterate what I said last week. Solo is doing way too much bumping for my liking. It's like every week now, getting laid out, attacked, knocked off his feet. Shouldn't be happening that often. He's turning into the Bloodline's punching bag. They need to protect him. They need to make him look like the muscle of the group, not Roman's certified crash dummy. Because that's all he's coming across as right now. He's the guy that eats the kicks from the Usos to protect Roman. And it happens way too much. I don't like it. But of course, Roman looks on afterwards. And, he eventually leaves with Paulie and Solo. And that was it. Tribal combat? This is weird. And I don't even entirely know if I'm making that out to be a good thing or a bad thing. It was just an odd segment. I don't entirely know what I'm supposed to make of the tribal combat gimmick. I mean, Jay basically laid out the playing field. It's no DQ, anything goes. But like, okay, is that the selling point? A no disqualification title match with Roman and Jay for the belt at SummerSlam? So, of course, the obvious question is, what's stopping Solo from interfering right after they ring the opening bell? Obviously, you would expect Jimmy to make an appearance, right? Possibly try to run in to help Jay out. I mean, it's not to say that I'm not interested to see the match. I don't think the segment did a great job hard selling it. Especially after all that stuff they did last week. No, 2 weeks ago it was. That 45-minute segment where they were just out there beating the shit out of each other. I don't know, I guess that's where I'm still having a hard time with all this. You know, Roman and Solo literally beat the crap out of the Usos on television like 2 weeks ago. One of whom ended up getting carted off in an ambulance. Now it's 2 weeks later. Jay's out there casually talking with Roman like they're two guys arguing over paycheck discrepancies. Shouldn't Jay be mad? Shouldn't he be the first to dive over the table to beat the holy high hell out of Roman and Solo for everything they did? Why do they have to wait to have a sanctioned title match? Jay literally said in this segment, it's no longer about the title. It's personal. They got a beef to settle. Why do you need to ring a bell for that? You're standing 3 feet from them. You proved that you could beat up the Usos, you could beat up Solo by yourself. So just do it. Kick Solo in the face. Start pounding away on Roman until security comes out. I don't know. It's weird. Like Solo and Heyman got shit canned the previous week. Now a week later, they're just out there in the ring together like nothing ever happened. No one's in a rush to jump attack anybody. It's like we're right back to square one again. Something's not adding up here. This is a weird timeline they got going on. I mean, they got a couple weeks to air out the details a little more, but when the show ended, there were small things that stuck in my craw with the way they went about laying this out. I didn't hate the segment, but I wasn't blown away. Which is kind of a good summation of this entire show. Not blown away. Wasn't moved. Lots of things happening on the show that I just kept raising eyebrows at. Once again, dropping the ball with LA Knight, beating their U.S. champion clean after he called out one of the two potential challengers for his title. Whatever the fuck's going on with the girls' division, I try to tune that out a lot of the time. Even the Roman J stuff kind of left a lot to be desired. I don't know. I can't even really say it was a bad show. It was just off. A lot of things that didn't click with this one. What do they call that in sports? Missing the mark. That's what happened with SmackDown this week. They missed the mark. You know what hasn't been missing the mark, though, is this AEW Collision program. I understand the competition isn't that high, but is this slowly becoming the one wrestling show every week that I'm actually looking forward to checking out? It's not hard, but when you book a television show that follows a logical path, and you actually have talented workers that are being spotlighted, gee, go figure. It almost makes for a better television show, doesn't it? How the hell did they figure that one out? And all it took was Punk beating the shit out of the EVPs after a press scrum. And now we're finally seeing somebody institute a little bit of positive change into the product. Now that they can't work under the same umbrella anymore, we're seeing 2 weekly AEW shows that are being run by totally opposite personalities. Totally different business mindsets. And isn't it funny how the Collision show is the one that's becoming the must-see program every week? Now that we're seeing actual star power and captivating stories and things that are actually worth coming back to check out. There are reasons to come back and watch the next week's episode because they're leaving great cliffhangers from the previous week. Now, to be fair, yes, in comparison to last television show, this was evidently going to be a notch or two down in terms of quality programming. You know, last week they just had their best TV match in company history, as well as a really solid main event to go on top of that, with a cool little closing angle that left everybody kind of hanging, wanting more. And obviously I'm talking about the Ricky Starks angle that closed out the show after he got the controversial win over CM Punk. He's the winner of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. Well, the men's Owen Hart tournament. But we don't really care about the girls' tournament, so we'll just talk about what really matters. And of course, their big lead-in for this week was, what's going on with Ricky Starks? He stole the win from Punk by grabbing a hold of the middle rope and cheating. So what's going on there? Is he a heel? Is he opportunistic? Let's tune in to find out. So out comes Ricky at the top of the show, looking like $1 million, flaunted by about $100,000 of pyro shooting off in the background. God, they really went above and beyond for that entrance. A little bit of overkill, but it was kind of humorous if you think about it for a minute. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not mention that I appreciated the nod to the Rock attire here. Ricky out there rocking the classic heel corporation look. And I guess it was fitting, because it was basically his way of saying, I'm a bad guy now. Actually, it wasn't that blatant. It wasn't the scripted WWE heel turn explanation. You fans made me do it. Because they literally have no other rationale for babyfaces turning in that company other than to blame the fans for not cheering for them. Now, Ricky's excuse was a little more real-world identifiable. He says, well, first off, he carried out a Louis Vuitton bag, which he joked about buying after he won the Owen Hart Cup. But there's nothing in the bag. He just wanted to parade it around to mock CM Punk. And then he said he got the job done, and that's all that matters. People keep asking, why did he do it that way? But the important thing is that he won by any means necessary. And that's Ricky's MO. Win at all costs. Just like Bobby Heenan used to say, win if you can, lose if you must, but always cheat. And of course, Ricky's out there firing on all cylinders. It's been so long since we've seen him work as a heel or even do promos as a heel. It hit me while I was watching him talk. Fuck. What a great bad guy. Boy, have we been missing out. He is so much more comfortable and natural in this role. And it showed with the way he carried himself here. I mean, that guy already oozes charisma on camera. But even just watching the moments where he wasn't talking here, the facials, his stance, everything about him. He's such a natural at being a villain. And of course, here comes Punk to confront him, as we would expect would happen. And, well, they're in New Jersey, so it's already a pretty anti-Punk crowd anyway. So he's out there working semi-heelish with the people, making fun of their sports teams and being snide. But Punk had a great delivery where he goes, I can eat the L. That's no problem. But for you, Ricky, can you live with the win? knowing that the only way you can credibly beat me is by cheating. And right as Punk goes to leave, Starks takes another shot at Punk's bag, basically implying that it's empty and there's nothing in it. So, of course, Punk comes back and essentially says the thing that we've all been speculating on, the fact that Punk is still carrying around the AEW World Championship. Technically, he was still never pinned or submitted for it, so he claims that he's the rightful champion, not the paper champion, Max. And just when things were kind of heating up between those two, who should then come out to join the party but Christian Cage and Luchasaurus, being sure to indicate that the only reason they're in New Jersey right now is that they're contractually obligated to appear. And then Christian Cage delivering the fucking heel line of the century when he goes, "Punk, let me ask you something. What kind of man carries around a belt that he didn't even win?" And of course, that immediately broke me. I mean, I'm sitting there on my couch howling. And unfortunately, it was enough to even break Punk. That guy was not even going to try to pretend like that wasn't hysterical. That was like straight out of a Tully Blanchard line on 605 TBS. What a fucking douchebag statement. Loved it. And, well, somehow while Christian was in the middle of talking, here comes Darby Allin from literally out of the void. He just shot in like a lawn dart. Just like when he does that cannonball dive out to the floor and he just whizzes by so fast you can't even see him. And to be honest, I kind of blanked out on a lot of his dialogue. But they ended up setting up the main event. It's Darby and Punk versus Christian and Ricky. Originally, I think Shivanto said it was going to be the Dinosaur teaming with Ricky, but he kind of fucked that up. Because Tony's horrible at his job. But, I mean, it worked. You know, there was great banter here. I appreciated that it did not break down into the proverbial four-way brawl. Yeah, it's literally something straight out of a Raw segment. Guy comes down to talk, then someone else comes out and interrupts him, then another guy comes out to interrupt him, and then another guy comes out to interrupt him, and boom, there's your tag team main event, playa. I figured they were hiring agents in this company. I just didn't think Tony Khan would have hired Teddy Long of all people. Gotta love those tag team matches. Normally, I'm not a big fan of these kinds of segments where they just use it as a way to set up the main event because they didn't have anything else booked in advance. Just like what I talked about with the SmackDown report where they had two impromptu matches on one show that were not originally planned. In kayfabe, obviously. I don't know, it makes the booking team look kind of lazy for not even bothering to book a main event before the start of the show. Like, don't you think they would have had that planned in advance? I don't know. Just nitpicky stuff. But, yeah, like I said, the promo interaction was great. I love the Ricky Starks deal. Punk was good. Christian was fabulous being a sleazy dirtbag. Darby was Darby. I mean, he's always hit and miss depending on what he's involved with. Got to admit, I like him a lot better when he's not doing garbage hardcore matches with Sting. But it at least made sense because of the history with Punk and Darby, so I was fine with it. I also appreciated that it didn't take 20 minutes to set up. Everyone came in, got their point across without killing the crowd, and they moved on with the show. Didn't overstay its welcome. Thumbs up for me. And then after the break, we come back for Action Audrey and Darius Martin versus Juice Robinson and Jay White. They keep calling him Bullet Club Gold. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around that. Mostly because anything linked with the Bullet Club is an instant turnoff for me. But after that tremendous match they had with FTR last week, I'll call Juice and Jay by whatever team name they want to go with. They've earned my respect. But I actually agree with the decision to book this. You know, this is the smart thing to do when one of your main event or upper card talents come off recent big TV losses. You know, you're trying to keep them in the hunt without pushing them down the card. So, you want to make sure you give them a big win back to keep them strong. My issue, though, is with the way they laid the match out. Yes, Juice and Jay needed a TV win after falling short in their match with FTR last week, but it also needed to be way more decisive and quick than it was. The fact that this went through a commercial and was that competitive, that's not the correct way to structure a match like this. It's not to say that Action Audrey and Darius should have been sent out there to be quick job fodder. If you want to push them as an underneath team, fine. There's a time and a place for that, but not in this setting. This needed to be a Juice and Jay showcase, and it didn't really have that feel. And the whole thing with the Gun Boys is still a little odd to me. I know they did that 8-man a few weeks back. They sort of established that those guys are a 4-man unit. But has it really been explained why Austin and Colton are all of a sudden hanging out with Juice and Jay? Why are they interested in being part of the Bullet Club Gold? What's their purpose? What's their end game? I don't really know. I like the Guns. I just don't really know if this is the right fit for them. They seem out of place. They had the right idea with the match. I just don't think it was effective because of how competitive it was. Needed to be a lot shorter and terse. Kind of like the Miro squash. Exactly what it needed to be this week. Short, concise, done and over with in a matter of minutes. Lo and behold, look what happens when you just have dudes go out there and kill people in short order. They end up getting massive babyface pops as a result. It's the Goldberg effect. Now, this was a little different in the sense that they had Nick Comoroto jumpstart Miro from the aisleway before the opening bell. And that I actually think worked. Mostly because when Miro fired back at the end, the people went ballistic when he started making the comeback. When he gave Comoroto that German suplex, the people all leapt to their feet. Hey, imagine that. Took them fucking 3 years to figure it out, but someone finally said, hey, this Nick Comoroto fella has an interesting look. Maybe we ought to try do something with the guy. Instead of making him a punching bag for QT Marshall. Now, yeah, they still beat him. But for the minute and a half he was on Miro here, he looked good. He's got that Dr. Death Steve Williams intensity to him. Big burly dude with broad shoulders and thick legs. Looks like a genetic freak of nature. And he can move. He's not a big stiff. God, if they actually would have spent the last 3 years building him up on television, who knows where that guy could have landed by 2023. Could have made a star out of him. Now, to be fair, the question still remains, what is this all leading to? The short Miro squashes are fine for now, but unless there's an end game in mind, there's not much to go off of at the moment. It's nice to see him rack up some wins on TV, but at some point, they are going to have to start doing something with him beyond that. And I'm still kind of wondering what that game plan is, or if they even have anything in mind. I mean, the TNT title would be my first proposition, but then again, I don't really know if we've been given any indication on whether or not he's supposed to be a babyface or a heel. He's kind of flip-flop recently. I mean, he got the big pop when he came back, and it seemed like they were going to run with him as a babyface, and then he just kind of started working as a heel. So, I don't know. I mean, if he's going to feud with Christian and Luchasaurus, he's got to be the babyface. But then again, if they want to keep him heel, they might need to prolong it for a little bit. And I'm not sure how much patience people have at this point. How long have we been waiting for them to actually do something with Miro? I don't know. It's been a hot minute. Like I said, for right now, it works. But is that going to be the same story in another 7 or 8 months? So then we came to the point in the show where, unfortunately, even I wasn't able to muster up the energy to sit through it. The House of Direct defended their trios titles against the Acclaimed. And it's nothing against the Acclaimed. I've enjoyed them as a three-man unit. But I just can't stomach the House of Direct shit. It's awful. It's had go-away heat with me for the longest time. So I had this match on in the background while I was doing other things. And here's the sardonic part of it. It didn't even go that long. I think I was out of the room for, some like 5 or 6 minutes? When I came back in the room, the House of Drek had already won and were headed up the aisleway. And that's when I caught the start of Billy Gunn in the ring taking off his boots and then walking out on the Acclaimed. And, well, everyone knows already what that's a sign of. It seems a bit odd to think that this would be Billy Gunn's last match. It's probably setting up something for a later angle. Maybe a heel turn. Of course, it's funny how that's where my hindbrain naturally gravitates towards. I've sort of been trained to think the polar opposite of what's been shown on camera. If I see a guy teasing retirement, my first instinct is, oh, so he's turning heel then. It's the Mark Henry effect. We'll see what happens. I mean, the Acclaimed are good, but I'm not going to lie when I say the act's kind of been stale for a while. They're definitely not white hot like they once were. Another case of Tony dropping the ball was something that got over on its own. But this might be a way to change things up and give the Acclaimed a necessary revamp. Yeah, not having Billy Gunn would be unfortunate, but I'm thinking they got something bigger in mind for later on. So at this point, right around the top of the hour, here come FTR for a promo. And they got a lot of moving targets surrounding them right now as they address in this promo. You know, Cash is there running down the teams they have unsettled business with, including the Beta Bucks, which got a tepid reaction. It was, I don't know, it was weird. More or less it was indifference and it was nuclear booing. I don't really know what to make of that. And, Cash does a nice job laying out the foundation of the story for next week's title match. Adam Cole is drinking the Kool-Aid right now. He's falling for MJF's plot, hook, line, and sinker. Everybody sees it, except for him. FTR have firsthand experience working with Max, so they know what his true colors are. He tells Adam to listen to his gut and listen to what MJF is blatantly saying every week. Don't trust the devil. You don't fuck with the devil. And Dax did sort of a long-winded roundabout promo where he talked about the fact that MJF and Cole aren't taking the tag division or the title match seriously. He mocked the comedy spots and the breakdancing skit they did, saying that they're already selling themselves short. And while the people are a fan of the act, it's important to remember that FTR are here to prove that they're the best team in the world, and that's what they're going to do next week in Hartford, and that's regardless of whether or not the fans cheer them. Good stuff. Short and sweet. Again, a promo segment that didn't overstay its welcome. It didn't drag on for too long. And I think Dax and Cash held their ground pretty well. The fans are obviously pro MJF and Cole because, well, they like the duo. It's popular. It's over. But I think FTR did a fine job overcoming the pressure and staying on their good side. They weren't healing everybody. It was all basic storytelling and setting the stages for next week's title match. And again, kind of going back to what Cash was saying here, I'm going to reiterate his talking point because it's crucial. I really hope they have something better in mind than the obvious plot twist of MJF turning on Cole and making him look like a dipshit. The last thing they need to do in this story is make Adam Cole look like a bumbling, gullible moron. And I'm afraid that's what they're going to do. I mean, Cash is saying the quiet part out loud here. I think a lot of people are expecting some kind of swerve or screw job finish where Max goes out there and bails on Cole and leaves him to fend for himself. God, I hope they have something craftier in mind than that. Because then Adam Cole comes out looking like a stupid babyface. And that's not the right end result. So anyway, a little bit more fast forwarding on my end. Taya Valkyrie wrestled Sky Blue. That one went a while, and Taya won with a Seth Rollins curb stomp-like move. At least I think that's what she was going for. And then she got on the mic and did a heel promo. Kind of. It certainly sounded like a heel promo. The fans were a little less than motivated. Poor Taya's out there trying to stir the people up and get them on edge. And she's not doing a halfway bad job, but everyone's just kind of sitting there going, boo. Or in the case of the one person that kind of won me over by acting like a troll, he'd wait for a silence break in the boos so he could just randomly interject with, "You suck!" And then Taya would try to cut in with a few more words, and then that same fan would go, "Shut up!" He did not sound impressed by Taya trying to be evil. Nor was I. I'm also not impressed about the idea of her wrestling Britt Baker, but guess we're going to be subjected to that on Wednesday night. Cool. I'm probably going to need a bathroom break in there somewhere. By all means, book that shit. Anyway. Wow. Guess we're already here. Main event time. That flew by. As advertised from the opener, it is Christian Cage and Ricky Starks versus Darby Allin and CM Punk, with plenty of TV time remaining. I've noticed a pattern with a lot of these Collision main events lately. It's actually kind of an interesting question to ask. Should they be regularly running long main event matches? I guess it depends on the talent pool. But we've seen a string of several Collision main events that have taken up almost the entire last half hour of the program. And Punk's been involved with most of them. It's quite the marathon. But again, I think if they have the right guys in there that can pull it off and they're methodical with how they lay the matches out, I'm not opposed to it. Maybe not every week. I don't think that's necessary. Albeit, they probably could have shaved off some time in this match. Did it really need to go 25 minutes? Probably not. It's not to say anything was bad about it, other than a few clunky spots or things they tried that didn't go according to plan. It was good stuff. I like the Ricky Christian dynamic right at the beginning where both guys were refusing to start the match. So Paul Turner was threatening to disqualify them if one of them didn't get in the ring before his 10 count. Just, again, heels acting like sleazy dirtbags. It's the kind of thing you'd like to see. And it's one of those things where they allotted a lot of time to it, so they let things breathe. They took their time building up to key spots. They're not going to go out there a million miles an hour from the opening bell. Babyfaces were largely in control up through the first commercial. Ricky and Christian weren't working on the same page, so that kind of left the door open for Punk and Darby to stay on offense for a while. They come back and they show the replay of how the heels were able to get control. During the heat portion, that's when they showed Scorpio Sky up in the, whatever the thing's called. The skybox, I guess. Ironically enough. Maybe that's going to be Scorpio's new gimmick. He's going to be Scorpio Skybox. He just travels to every Collision show and watches from up there. He never wrestles or does promos. He just watches from his designated Skybox seat. That'd be a heck of a gig. It's like Crow Sting all over again. Minus the face paint. Or, descending from the rafters on a janky cable. Anyway, I like how they went with the two separate hot tags here. At first you had Punk working as the babyface in peril, and he was able to tag Darby in so he could get a flurry of offense going for a little bit. And then later on, once the match was kind of coming to a close, they kind of reversed that situation so Punk could get the hot tag. Kind of the Ricky Robert dynamic of the Rock and Roll Express. They did some stuff during Darby's comeback where he tried to do the cannonball dive to the floor. But as he was going toward Christian, Luchasaurus stepped in the way. So Darby basically just bounced off him like a pinball. Luchasaurus didn't budge an inch. It was comical. Not sure if that's the intent to make your babyface look pathetic in that sense, but it's at least believable when you look at the size difference between those two. And, they stayed on the heat for a long while. The heels could double team Darby and work the crowd. Punk's trying to fire everybody up and milk the big comeback spot. And eventually he gets in there and runs wild. When I look back, though, his comeback didn't last all that long. And Darby was right back in there as the legal guy within a matter of seconds. I don't remember Punk doing much. But apparently Darby's a massive healer, because he was out and back in within a matter of moments. And, they start building into some false finishes, which were pretty good. Seeing Darby kick out of the Rochambeau was a little much. I thought that was Ricky's finish. I know he's been using the spear interchangeably, but I've seen Ricky win with that Rochambeau a lot. It was kind of hard to buy to see Darby kick out of that in a random TV main event. But they do a cool looking spot where Darby countered a superplex into a scorpion death drop from the middle rope. That didn't look easy to execute, but Darby's so fucking puny to begin with. It's probably easy enough for Ricky to rotate him over so he could have enough time to balance himself on the turnbuckle before dropping him down. And they did some brief four-way spots at the end until Punk took out Christian with a GTS on the floor. And back in the ring, Darby and Starks traded some roll-ups until Starks pinned Darby by grabbing the bottom rope. Yet again, going back to the cheating well. But he got the job done. And that's all that counts, right? And again, they're establishing some great stuff in the main event scene right now. I like the idea of Starks being a little shithead and getting under Punk's skin by purposefully cheating to win his matches. They've already planted the idea that Starks can't legitimately beat Punk unless he cheats. So when they do have their rematch, the finish is what everybody's going to be paying attention to, which is the exact end result you want. The lead up to the finish. And Darby and Christian, or Darby and Luchasaurus, depending on who he ends up feuding with directly, that's cool. I love Christian pretending to be the TNT champion even though he's not. And the dinosaur's pea brain hasn't caught on to that fact yet, that he's supposed to be walking around with the belt. And then Christian's there just carrying it for him. That dynamic is working brilliantly. I wouldn't change anything about that. Again, they're doing a lot of right things. They're slow burn building programs. They're taking their time and paying special attention to detail. They're actually trying to establish stories and personalities, giving you reasons to care about things that are happening. Those are the kinds of things that I'm mainly looking for when I watch this show. And the one thing I'm still wondering about all this is, what's going on with Joe? How does he factor into everything? They've left that one open-ended, so I'm interested to see how he goes back to revisiting his feud with Punk. I'm assuming that's ongoing. I don't think they've dropped that yet. Are they only using the Starks thing as a placeholder program to give Punk a big win and then send him back at Joe? Or is Joe going to factor into that rematch and fuck Punk over? Funk Puck over, whichever. Yes, both. And, here's the thing, too. The fact that we don't know what's going to happen, it's captivating. It's not predictable. They got a lot of moving puzzle pieces right now. And I'm interested to see how everything lines up in the end. It may not go the way that I initially thought it would, but that's cool. As long as they explain everything and as long as it makes sense. It's all I care about. And yeah, the show obviously wasn't as good as last week. That was to be expected. But they followed up with a lot of things in the key areas. Again, there's a consistency to everything I see on this show. They have their collection of regulars. They have their top guys. They have their prelim guys. Things are tying together from week to week. I'm not left wondering how they got from point A to point D with no explanation. The shows don't have to be perfect to be good. I think it's important to remember that. We've been reviewing plenty of Crockett TV shows, and for a lot of the time we watch those shows, a lot of them are either boring or uneventful, with the exception of the angles or promos that tie all the stories together. And that's mainly what we're there to watch. And to make fun of the horrible job guys. Here, it's a little bit of a different dynamic because, we are still being given the top shelf TV matches in addition to everything else that's going on. So, it's not exactly studio wrestling, but there are a lot of old school concepts that are being applied. And it's what stands out above everything else. Even if I'm not a fan of everything they book from week to week, I can at least value that they're attempting to be consistent. It's the small things that matter. But I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing. So, that'll wrap another one up. Let's get out of here, shall we? Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And make sure you stop back on Friday for the Dynamite Report and the continuation of our Retro Review series. Got more stuff to talk about there. And we are slowly coming up on SummerSlam, which is, I believe, 2 weeks out. So I'll have to set aside some time to figure out how I want to break that Monday show down. As usual, I'll probably just omit the SmackDown report. It's normally how I go about doing it. And I think that's all I've got for today. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Feel free to comment, chime in with your thoughts on everything. Subscribe, like the video. Again, check us out on Rumble, too, if you prefer to watch over on that platform. YouTube is not the be-all, end-all anymore, so pick your poison. And catch you guys soon. Take care. Peace out.